Okay, in this video I just wanted to talk about SSD issues on the Panasonic Lumix cameras, and specifically here I'm using my Panasonic GH6 and I'm using the Samsung T7 Shield, and I've got it mounted using like the SSD rig that I use. I'll link to a video on the kind of stuff I use here if you're not sure about any of it, but essentially I'm using the SSD over USB, and I've been using this for a while, and I've started to have the issue where if I switch the camera on, I've got it set up into SSD mode, so it should just kind of switch on and work. And then what will happen is I'm in the 5.8K open gate mode here, and then when I start recording, you know, I used to be able to leave this for a good amount of time. It would just keep going. I never had to worry about it. And what's happened now is that it gets to a certain point and then the SSD starts to basically not be able to keep up like a kind of sustained read and write speed. So the write speed is just too slow for it, and you can see on the back we've got the error, recording was cancelled due to the limitation of writing speed of the USB-SSD. And you know, this is a decent drive. It's a USB 3.2 drive. That's the standard of the port on the side, so it's on the recommended list of SSD drives as well. It's had its firmware update, but the one thing that has changed on it, you know, I've used this for quite a lot of projects, and recently what I normally do is I'll do my shoot, I'll clear off the SSD drive, and then I'll format it and sort of go on to the next shoot. But I did 2 shoots in a row, and I also didn't sort of come back in between them. So I was basically working on the camera, doing a couple of different bits and pieces, and I used this drive to edit off of, which, you know, it's quite a common thing. I quite often do that, but usually I'd format the camera, or not format the camera, format the SSD drive in between those times. I've got a video about how to do that, so I'll link that up in the corner. But essentially, yeah, I'd format the drive every time, and this time I'd basically had 2 projects on there, and outside of the DCIM folder I was actually editing projects as well off this drive on my laptop, and that's when I started to come up against these issues. So essentially, if you're coming up against that problem, what you're going to want to do is come into the camera, and then we've got here, if you come into, so you just hit in menu, coming up to the spanner or the wrench, and then you want to be in the top one, which is called card and file, and you can see up here we've got USB format is basically the top one on there, so USB SSD format. And I've made sure all my files are backed up here, so you know, make sure you've done that as well. And then you can hit yes, and then that's essentially going to format the SSD drive, which could take a little while because, you know, this is a 1 terabyte drive, but 2 projects for me, it's filled a fair chunk of that drive, you know, so it could take a little while for that to kind of clear off. And I think that's part of the issue as well, that I have used a large portion of the drive, and I've been working outside of the DCIM kind of folders, which isn't something that the camera particularly likes. So then what happens now, I'm still in 5.8K, hit record, and then you can see we've got that counter sort of down at the bottom. And last time, around 15 seconds we got to, and we basically came up against that sustained kind of write error. And with any luck now, with a newly formatted drive, we should be running a bit longer. You can see we're already running up to kind of 22 seconds. And what I'll do is I'll flip the screen up, and I'll just kind of leave that going. Let me just see if I can, there we go. So you can see this is still going and still working, and it is just purely a case of, you know, the drive needed to be formatted because it just had too much stuff on it. It doesn't like those files, you know, sat outside the DCIM folder, I don't think. I mean, this is just me, you know, working these things out as I go along a lot of the time, but I do the same with my CF Express cards and my SD cards. I always try to clear them off, make sure they're formatted. And if you don't do that with the SSD drive, you'll run into those same issues where you get these kind of write limitations. And I see a lot of people having issues with the kind of SSD drive saying this issue, but the thing is, I don't know how often they are clearing off their drives, you know, like it's not as easy for everybody because you might be using this in a totally different way, the SSD, but I tend to have a project, clear that off, and then that goes onto my dash drive, which I'll link up to a video on like how I use kind of storage and backups, but I basically have a dash drive that's 2 drives, then everything's backed up, everything can come off my SSD drive, and then, you know, you've got a working sort of system there where you don't have to keep things on this SSD drive and you don't have to edit off it or anything. I mean, they're great drives to edit off, they're perfectly good drives for that, but you can't really use it for both. What you'll want to do is, if you want one of these to edit off, you really need one to shoot on and one to edit off, and that's exactly what I do. If I'm traveling or I can't get to my dash drive, I'll have a second one of these. And I've also got an NVMe version of an external drive, which I've actually just put together, and I was going to do a video about that soon. So yeah, if you want to see about that, obviously sort of stay subscribed, and you can kind of check that out. But that's about it really. It was really just to kind of say, you know, if you're having issues like this and you kind of don't know why it's happening, just get the SSD backed up, get everything onto your machine, get it plugged in, get it formatted, and then try again, and then, you know, it should work. Like I say, we're using the same modes here, and 1 minute it works and the next minute it doesn't, and it's purely just because it's reformatted itself and it's got a nice clean drive to kind of write to. So yeah, hopefully that's kind of helped. The other thing to say as well, I do have my Lumix battery here, but it's not a battery thing. I have used it with the official battery, it still didn't work. Used it with a third party, still didn't work. So it's purely an SSD thing, it's not a battery thing. So yeah, that's another thing to kind of make note of. But yeah, if that's helped, give the video a like. If you want to see more Lumix content, check out the playlist on this channel, and please subscribe.